When you look closely at how the human body survives in a world filled with invisible threats, you begin to realize something profound. Survival has never depended solely on medicine or technology, but on the quiet intelligence of nature itself. Long before laboratories and antibiotics existed, human beings turned to plants not out of superstition, but out of necessity. And what is remarkable is that modern science now confirms what intuition and tradition had already discovered. Many herbs are not merely flavorful additions to food, they are sophisticated biological allies. Consider garlic, for instance. Within it lies allicin, a compound capable of disrupting harmful bacteria and viruses. Turmeric contains curcumin, which doesn't just fight inflammation but also modulates immune responses. Ginger stimulates circulation and enhances the body's ability to respond to infection. Oregano and thyme carry potent antimicrobial oils, while cloves and cinnamon contain compounds that inhibit fungal and bacterial growth. These are not random coincidences. They are evidence of a deeper pattern. Nature has equipped certain plants with chemical architectures that mirror the body's own defense strategies. But here is where the discussion becomes more than biological, it becomes philosophical. The immune system is not a passive shield. It is a dynamic, adaptive intelligence that learns, responds, and evolves. Herbs, in this sense, do not replace the immune system, they educate it, strengthen it, and refine its capacity to distinguish between threat and safety. When you regularly consume such herbs, you are not merely treating symptoms, you are participating in a long-term dialogue with your own biology. Psychologically, this shifts your identity from a victim of illness to an active participant in health. You begin to understand that resilience is built not through dramatic interventions, but through small, consistent choices that accumulate over time. Each herb you choose is not just a dietary decision, it is a statement about responsibility, awareness, and respect for the intricate systems that keep you alive. And perhaps that is the most important realization of all: when you align your habits with the wisdom embedded in nature, you are not fighting against your body. You are finally working with it. If you trace the story of herbal medicine across civilizations, you begin to see that it is not a collection of random folk practices, but a continuous experiment carried out by humanity over thousands of years. Every culture, in its own way, observed what healed and what harmed, what strengthened and what weakened. Over time, patterns emerged. Garlic was valued in Egypt and India, turmeric in South Asia, oregano and thyme in the Mediterranean, neem in Ayurveda, holy basil in spiritual and medicinal traditions, echinacea among Native American healers. These were not arbitrary choices, they were discoveries refined through generations of experience. What makes this story truly compelling is that modern science has stepped into the conversation and confirmed much of what ancient wisdom already understood. Researchers now identify specific compounds that explain why these herbs work. Allicin in garlic disrupts microbial cell walls. Curcumin in turmeric influences inflammatory pathways and immune signaling. Carvacrol in oregano and thymol in thyme exhibit broad-spectrum antimicrobial activity. Eugenol in cloves interferes with fungal and bacterial growth. These findings do more than validate tradition. They reveal that the human instinct to turn towards certain plants was grounded in biological reality. Yet there is a deeper lesson here. The divide we often imagine between traditional and scientific knowledge is largely artificial. In truth, both are attempts to understand the same phenomenon: how life sustains itself in the face of constant threat. Ancient healers used observation and intuition, modern scientists use microscopes and data. But both are guided by the same fundamental question: what allows the organism to endure? Psychologically, this realization can be transformative. It challenges the modern tendency to dismiss ancient knowledge as irrelevant or inferior. Instead, it invites humility. It suggests that progress is not always about replacing the past, but about integrating it with clarity and precision. When you understand that herbs represent a convergence of history and evidence, you begin to see them not as relics of superstition, but as bridges between wisdom and reason. And perhaps the most powerful insight is this: when tradition and science point in the same direction, ignoring their message is no longer ignorance, it is a choice. Once you recognize that herbs are not mystical curiosities but practical instruments of health, an inevitable question emerges. What do you do with that knowledge? Insight, after all, is meaningless if it remains abstract. The real transformation begins when understanding is translated into habit, when the extraordinary becomes ordinary through daily practice. Most people imagine that strengthening their health requires dramatic change, radical diets, or complex routines. But the truth is far more subtle and, in many ways, more demanding. It requires consistency. It requires the willingness to make small, intelligent decisions repeatedly, even when no immediate reward is visible. Adding garlic and turmeric to your meals, brewing ginger or holy basil tea, seasoning food with oregano and thyme, using cinnamon and cloves not just for taste but for resilience, these are modest actions, yet their cumulative effect is profound. What is fascinating is that these choices operate on two levels simultaneously. Biologically, they provide antimicrobial, anti-inflammatory, and immune-supporting compounds that strengthen the body's defenses. Psychologically, they reshape your relationship with your own well-being. You stop waiting for illness to force you into action and begin cultivating health as a deliberate project. In doing so, you shift from a reactive posture to a proactive identity, from chaos to order. There is also a philosophical dimension to this process. Every culture that survived learned to integrate healing plants into daily life, not as emergency medicine but as a way of living. When you adopt herbs as part of your routine, you are not merely following a trend, you are aligning yourself with a pattern that has sustained human beings across centuries. You are participating in a long tradition of individuals who understood that survival is not accidental, it is structured through disciplined choices. And perhaps this is the most challenging truth: the power of herbs does not lie in their rarity, but in their accessibility. They are effective precisely because they can be used every day. The responsibility, therefore, does not belong to nature alone, it belongs to you. Because in the end, health is not something you find in moments of crisis, it is something you build quietly, one deliberate choice at a time.